Welcome to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. I'm your host, Jill, time management strategist, author, award-winning speaker, and advocate for all things growth in motherhood. Just a quick reminder that if you're listening to this, you can actually also watch this episode on YouTube and see the conversation that I'm having today with Pam in action. So I want to introduce my new friend. Pam and I got connected through LinkedIn, actually, in an effort for me to gain some market research. And she was so kind enough to connect with me and share some information as well as her story a little bit, which is why I'm having her on the show today. Pam is the president and CEO of Ontario Cycling, and she's a mom. So this is what we're here to talk about. Welcome to the show, Pam.
Thank you so much, Jill. And I have to say, it was so awesome when you reached out to me and I learned more about you and the work that you're doing. So I am so honored to be here and really looking forward to our chat.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so fun to be able to just have these conversations, make connections. I think
Hmm.
the more that I do this work, the more I realize that's what it's really all about, is like
Hmm.
the networking and the connections. And you never know who you're going to impact through someone else inadvertently, which I love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hmm.
So to set the scene, can you give us a little backstory about how things came to be for you with this big job that you have and as a mom? Tell us how many kids you've had, how many kids you have, and anything that really feels important to share to get started.
Oh, wow. Okay. So,
And go.
and go. Yeah, so this is my third role in sport management. So managing what we call a provincial territorial sport organization. So we're not for profits, but we're not charitable designated. So pretty much every sport has one in all the different provinces, and we're members of the national sport organization. So in this case, it would be Cycling Canada. So I fell into sport through my kids, as we all tend to do, and become volunteers and involved. And so I started off as a volunteer, helping with events, ended up then going, you know what? I think I need to be on the board of the club. Got on the board of the club, ended up becoming the president of the club, and then said, I'd like to be a coach. I'd like to be an official. And so became a coach and an official in that sport, and then ended up getting on the board of the provincial territorial sport organization of that sport. And then they needed a staff person. And so they asked me to put my name in. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And that kind of started my journey, because prior to that, I was a stay-at-home mom. I was privileged enough to be able to stay home with my two children. I have two. My daughter is 19 and my son is 22. And so, was a stay-at-home mom. But prior to that, had worked on Bay Street and had done a lot of administration and operational roles in different organizations, had done some consulting. Um, and so when I was able to stay at home, as we all find ourselves, for those of us who are lucky enough, you end up wanting to be busy, right? So for me, it was like, I need something for my brain. So I was doing volunteering with the school. I was president of school council. I was writing grants. I was doing fundraising. Sport just kind of seemed to be this great segue. And for me, it was being a part of something with my children, but then it was learning to step back and allow them to have their sport while I did my own thing, and then learning and growing through these roles. And I have to say, these roles are incredible opportunities, because while they're very heavy administratively and from a business development standpoint, there's also very gratifying in seeing young children grow and develop and become athletes that are achieving their goals, whether that would be provincially, nationally, or at the Olympics. So it's a really cool role to have. And I did end up getting it as a single parent. So that was also very challenging through all of that, to
Yeah.
raise my children and learn and grow in roles that I'd never done before. And at the same time, be there for my kids.
Yeah, I want to unpack that story as well. But first, I
Mm,
just want to make sure that the audience really heard this piece that I think is so important that you touched on, and that is being involved with the kids and having that connection. And at the same time, letting them free, letting them have their
yeah.
thing, right? It's
Yeah.
this delicate balance. And this is part of
Hmm.
how we raise resilient kids, which is something
Hmm.
that you have certainly done. And I am so eager to chat about the lessons you've learned through that,
Hmm.
because most of the listeners have kids who are still little, like mine are,
Yeah.
well, 14, 11, 7, and 5, but like small
Yeah.
enough that we're still in the thick of the
Mm-hmm.
attachment years where they
Mm-hmm.
really need us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's figuring out how to step back but still be involved, step back but still be involved. And I think that really does lead to our kids being able to manage challenges and crisis and feel safe still and have that connection. So
Mm-hmm.
before we dive into that topic, I want to hear what it was like for you as a single mom raising these kids, as a single
Mm.
mom raising these kids and building your career, because that must have been really challenging.
It was. I'm not going to lie and sugarcoat it. It was incredibly frustrating and challenging and a lot of roadblocks, lessons learned. Being a stay-at-home parent and then trying to get back into the workforce was passed over many, many times. A lot of negativity, a lot of pushback. Even trying to get my name back and try and build my credit and try and decide what it is I wanted to do and going back to school and taking courses and continuing education and trying to make sure that I was up to current standards when it came to technology and even just basics with software. Um, so it was all very challenging and trying to be relevant. And when you have that gap, I think it's better now, but when you had that gap on your resume, um, in the 2000 like early 2000s, it was kind of, where have you been and what have you been doing? And I even had one person ask me if I knew how to use a computer.
Wow.
So yeah, so it was very much of I couldn't even get an interview. So I ended up creating my own role through this, but at the same time was privileged enough to be able to work from home while I did it. So it allowed me to have that fluctuating day where I could be there for my kids, could pick them up from school, and then at night be working while they were sleeping.
Yeah, I think that's the reality of a lot of these work
Hmm.
from home positions, especially for
Hmm.
parents.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword. It's really nice to have the flexibility to be able to do the drop off and pick up, to be there for meals, to be there for
Hmm.
bedtime, to see your kids as they go through their day in the
Hmm.
non-school hours. However, it often means that we're working early and we're working late and we are taking our laptops to bed with us and we are taking them on vacation with us and
Yes.
we are making up extra time on off
Hmm.
hours. And I think, at least for many of us, especially as moms, we're feeling like we need to even put more in because we're not doing the FaceTime in the office,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
so it's an interesting thing, this work from home. I know many people really love it. I really love it, but I do
Mm.
find that it can add to the constant busyness of the day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's very hard to unplug when it's always there.
Yeah. No, yeah, my goodness.
Hmm.
And so that's another really interesting thing that women still face is that
Hmm.
we have this opportunity to be able to stay home and raise the kids, right?
Hmm.
Especially in Ontario, it's getting better, but childcare is very expensive. It's prohibitive in a lot of
Hmm.
cases
Hmm.
financially. And so we stay home and we make that sacrifice for our families, and it's
Hmm.
wonderful. Many of us love it. I could not do it. That's like my worst nightmare, which is totally fine. It's
Oh
not for
yeah.
everyone. But if you have that opportunity, you're almost
Hmm.
penalized at the
Hmm.
end of it. And I'm so
Yeah.
sorry that that was the case for you, because here you are, this ambitious, hardworking, brilliant woman who has a lot to offer, and you're being passed over time and time again.
Mm. Thank
And
you.
I mean, is that something that you saw in your community of other moms? Was anyone else experiencing this with you in different industries or in different ways?
Um, yes and no. I like our neighborhood was a mixed bag of women who were working full time, who had daycare, had nannies. We couldn't afford that, which is why I stayed home. Um, and they had that opportunity, which was great, and so they were able to continue their careers. And then there's other women that I was friends with who stayed home, who did odds and ends back and forth, did a lot of volunteering because I find like that's a way to give back. It's a way to be involved. It's a way to feel active and relevant and challenge, get the mind going. But I think being passed over or all those challenging aspects of that made me who I am. And that just strengthened me. So I don't see it as a negative per se. I see it as a lesson learned. So, right, in terms of it wasn't about me, it was about the perception of society towards a woman who stayed home to raise their kids. So that wasn't about who I was. And I didn't have to prove myself to them. I just had to keep being me and keep pushing through and finding what made me feel better about that.
I love that mindset. I think that shows such strength and like self-worth, which is something that obviously is required with resilience, because the sort of, when I think of resilience, I don't have a definition in front of me, but when I think of resilience, it's sort of like that ability to keep going in the face of challenge, is that trust that things are going to work out. It's that self-confidence that you can do it even when you encounter obstacles and roadblocks. And I see our kids, our young generation right now, struggling with this quality big time. And I think, and I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to do an episode about this later, about tech and society
Okay.
now. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
God.
Yeah,
But I think it's so valuable to see that in a parent, like your kids were able to see you model that.
absolutely.
What else do you
Absolutely.
think contributed to the fact that you were able, like, what else did you do with the kids or on your own to model to them different ways to build this resiliency?
Good question. I have to say, I never lied to them. I never hid who I was. I never hid my challenges, which I know is it can be contentious in terms of we're trying to protect kids and keep them kids longer. But I also feel that by being my true self with them and letting them see when I was hurt, letting them see when I was upset and tired and cranky and stressed, and at the same time explaining to them why I was. So it wasn't about them, right? That allowed them to see me as a human being and for them to come to respect me, but also trust me because I was trusting them with who I was. And I was trusting them with the challenges and the frustrations and the tears and all these other things so that both my kids understand what it means to be resilient and that just because you have an obstacle doesn't mean the world ends. You might have a cry, you might get upset, you might yell, you might go punch some pillows, right? Like,
Yeah.
but that's okay. Like, so like when my kids were younger and my son had a lot of emotions, I would always say, if you want to yell and scream, go to your bedroom, punch your pillows, trash your stuffed animals. I don't care. That's your safe space. Go get it out. And when you're ready to come talk to me, we can. So, and he would get it all out. I'd hear it upstairs and I'm like, oh, but at the same time, when he was done, we could then sit down and have a conversation. And he felt safe because I allowed him to express those emotions without trying to curb them and stop them
I
or
love it.
direct them, right? Like kind of go, oh, you shouldn't feel that way, or that kind of thing. I think we have to recognize the emotions even in ourselves and say, I'm feeling really angry right now, and this is why.
Yeah.
And being honest with ourselves, I think that's the only way you're going to grow. And I mean, they saw the challenges that I had, they saw the work that I did, they saw how much I was doing. Um, I also think they saw the other aspects of things between the family, like because all of this ended, like my marriage ended and then I had to go get a job. So it was kind of like they saw all these challenges and all these different things, and I was honest with them so they could understand. So in other words, I wasn't throwing too much at them, but being honest enough that they could go, okay. And so having those conversations with them now as adults, it's very interesting because my son will say, he goes, I'm so proud of you and who you what you did and how you raised us because you did so much for us and I see that and I see you not only as a parent but as a woman
Mm.
and recognizing that and then in turn I see how he treats his girlfriend which is beautiful and I get messages from her going he's amazing and he's so good to me and thank you so much for raising such a good son and so I think having those conversations like I said and being honest and transparent are very important. And I see my daughter now very strong in her opinions and understanding the challenges, but being upfront and honest in her discussions with them with me.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Did you learn these skills? Did you just have these skills intuitively in terms of how you moved through life and how you parented? Was this a skill set that was felt natural to you, or did you learn? Because this is something that I think was is now becoming more known in this conscious parenting type of atmosphere where we're like, oh, okay, we're seeing maybe what happened in previous generations. We're trying to fix things. We're trying to understand how we can give kids the best chance, let them feel their emotions, let them have this space connect, like safe connection with us, all of
Mm.
these things. But it wasn't talked about in the early
No.
2000s.
Oh,
So
no.
how were you lucky enough to have this tool in your toolkit?
Um, I think I that's a hard question. I think it was both. I think there was an intuitiveness of this is how I want to have a relationship with my children, and it may not have been what I had. Um, and it was kind of like those things of what would I like to have with my kids. And I think I've always saw them as separate from me. They're not me. So I'm not living vicariously through my children. I'm standing back and watching, going, this is awesome. Like they're making their own decisions, they're having their own lives. And that's what I believe being a parent is. It's not helicoptering, it's not diving in to save them. It's not, you know, we can be advocates for our children, but I think that sometimes we have to pull back and say, okay, what is it you want? So one of the lessons you asked earlier about lessons about learning how to like let them have their sport. I think sport's such a unique situation because we want our kids to do well and we want them to be happy, and we might be dealing with tears and frustration at home, but I think that we can't as parents, and I learned this the hard way, we can't keep swooping in. And I was a sport parent when I started, and I learned very quickly that that was the wrong approach.
Mm.
And it wasn't the right one for my kids. And I caused more anxiety and stress in them by doing this, as opposed to stepping back and going, what do you want? Are you having fun? Like, is this for you or is this for me? Because if it's for me, that's not the right choice. And it's like that with anything. So when they got into school, I never asked about like, or pushed pressure on them for marks. Did you
And
do your best?
right. How do you
Okay.
feel about your
How
effort?
do you feel? And then that makes them go, well, yeah, I probably could have done better. Well,
Right.
yeah, you probably could have. So now you learn for next time,
Yeah. And you
right?
know
So it's
what? An 80 for one kid might be their pride and joy, and an 80 for a different kid might be a disappointment. So it's really dependent on the kid too.
absolutely. And both of them are so, so different. And it's remembering, as I said, they're separate and they're individual. So embracing that individuality in your children and setting them up for success is obviously for me, it's the whole purpose of being a parent. It's not about creating individuals that are gonna represent you and who you are. It's about them and creating people to allow them to be who they want to be.
Yeah, that's amazing. Before we wrap up, I'm curious to pick your brain on the role that you think, like being in sport.
Mm-hmm.
How does sports build resiliency in our kids? And because
Oh,
I want to just touch briefly without going to like, I know that there's many ends of the spectrum here on how people feel about the participation awards, right?
yes,
But
yes.
how is that impacting the kids? And to me, that my initial reaction, I'm on both sides. I'm like, oh, that's so great. And then I'm like, but they're not learning to win and lose. And so can you shine some light from someone who's
Mm,
in the industry on what that's all about?
sure. I mean, I think it's gone so that it's gone the long-term athlete development pathway in terms of how we manage and kids experiences, but also like their physical and emotional development in sport is it's gone through iterations a few times over the last few decades. I think the idea of participation is great at a recreational level in terms of you're allowing everybody to have an opportunity. So I think that's big. They're allowing everyone to have an opportunity and recognizing that opportunity and that experience. But if your child is moving down that pathway for competition and they're moving out of that recreational kind of participation and active and getting out there and that kind of thing, but now they're interested in actually pursuing competition, that's where that participation falls to the wayside because you're now setting them up for not success, not being able to adjust to loss or challenges. We see like even with Olympians, like see what the past Olympic cycle, there people, not everybody makes the friggin' podium. There's hundreds and hundreds of athletes, thousands of athletes. And you have athletes that are incredible and they might have won a world championship at 2 months prior, but then they come to the Olympics and they don't even make the finals. Everybody has off days. So how do you handle those off days? Those off days are learning to recognize it's okay. So for me, you're growing. It's all about growing. It's not about failure. It's not about like, oh, I didn't get a medal, or oh, I didn't get this, or I didn't get that. No, what did you learn? What did you take away from this experience that's going to make you better the next time? What are things that you can learn about yourself? And I think when we're helicoptering in and we're doing these participation awards, we're actually not teaching our children about the real world and what's out there and how we succeed or grow in our own lives. And I don't like to use the word failure because I think that it's not about that. It's a learning opportunity. And that might be, somebody might say, well, that's just like, utopian in your viewpoint. But I don't think that. I think it's like, okay, I screwed up. What did I learn? I didn't eat properly. I didn't hydrate properly. It just didn't click today, or I didn't feel it today. So I think when we look at sports, it's a great learning tool. And one of the things I always use with my team and in speaking with people, it's from the field of play to the boardroom and back again. What are those tools? And we know that people who are involved in sport, women especially, there's lots of data, become great leaders, become great in their careers and their pathways because they've been set to learn how to adjust, grow, keep developing, keep moving forward, and not allowing these obstacles to stop them from achieving what they want to achieve.
That's amazing. I love the perspective. I absolutely love everything that you talk about. I am so grateful to have had you here, to have met you, and to have had the opportunity to just bring you on the show and be able to share with the audience this wonderful perspective of someone who has accomplished a lot and raised great kids doing it, who's been able to pursue her ambitions and her career and has great relationship with the kids and whose kids are thriving, right? So thank you for all of your perspective. Is there anything that feels like a message that you want to send to the moms, something that you wish everyone knew, or anything that we haven't touched on that you want to share before we wrap up today?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, thank you for having me and inviting me and allowing this conversation to happen. I think the main thing is that for me, it's like my kids are the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, bar none. They're amazing human beings. And I think that it's recognizing that when you come to this side and you see how they are, and you look at those times when, oh my God, you're exhausted, and I just don't think I can do it again, or I don't know what to do, or you think you've made a mistake in a discipline or a conversation with your child, just know that that is not the end of the path, and that is not the end of the story, and that is not the end of the relationship.
Yeah.
They don't even remember.
Right. Right.
Right. And things that I've gone back and said, oh my God, I am so sorry I said that or did that. They're like, what? And I'm like, no, because you internalize those mistakes, again, quotations. But I think that in knowing that and never beating yourself up and constantly having that dialogue with your children and checking in, and did you have fun? Did you enjoy yourself? What do you want to talk about? And knowing the door is open and that no subject matter is taboo ever,
Right.
ever.
Thank you. That's such great perspective for us who are still in the thick of the hard years.
Yeah, I feel yeah.
Yeah. And you know what I've noticed too, kind of the opposite, is that the kids will remember things that you don't even think about.
Yes.
So like they're all going to
Yes.
therapy anyways, so don't worry,
Oh,
you
I
know?
know. I make jokes all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can tell the therapist that I said
Right.
I
Exactly.
tried.
Well,
There's nothing, you can't be perfect, and there's no perfection in anything,
we're all just doing our best here.
right? Yeah.
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 Well, thank you again. And for the listeners, if you have made it to the end, you obviously really love this conversation, and we would really love it if you could send us a little note on LinkedIn or on Instagram and just let us know what you thought about the conversation today
Would
and what
love
really
that.
resonated.
Would
Yeah.
love that. Well, thank
And
you, Jill, so much. And thank you, anybody who's watching and listening. Always happy to talk about, and even being a sport parent. So if anyone has any questions for me in terms of that, I'm more than happy to help. Been there, done that.
Thank you. We'll make sure your contact information is in the show notes so that everyone can reach out. And until next week, keep on growing like a mother.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jill.